Hello, and welcome to another episode of Decoding Decarbonization. Today, we are talking about the topic of electrification of corporate fleets. I am Noorie Rajvanshi. I lead sustainability for Siemens Smart Infrastructure in the United States. A significant number of Fortune 500 companies, including Siemens, have established ambitious climate and sustainability targets. For many, fleet electrification stands as a critical pillar in achieving these objectives, particularly given its substantial contribution to reducing Scope 1 emissions. We are seeing compelling evidence that external targets, such as those set by Science Based Target Initiatives or SBTI or EV100, coupled with robust internal company policies, are being reinforced by a clear economic advantage. And this combination of factors is driving an accelerated adoption of electric vehicles, a trend that is proving resilient to external political shifts. And this continued progress is also clearly evident through numbers published by the Climate Group in their EV100 progress report earlier this week. According to this report, since the launch of EV100 in 2017, its over 120 member companies globally have collectively deployed over 400,000 EVs and installed over 48,000 charging units. These are some impressive numbers, and we here at Siemens are contributing to it. So, to discuss this topic from Siemens's perspective, on today's episode, I am welcoming Adam Orth, who leads our fleet electrification strategy as US head of fleet. Adam and I will discuss Siemens's journey towards transition to a 100% electric fleet in the US as he decodes the process of making fleet electrification a reality for us. And what makes this timing particularly exciting is that we are marking a huge milestone here in US. Our US fleet is 50% electrified. So with that, Adam, welcome to the podcast and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's dive into this. Firstly, congratulations on this incredible milestone. Reaching 50% electrification is a tremendous achievement, and especially given that our US fleet acquired its first EV only in 2020, this is really great news. So, can you share what's been the biggest learning or surprise in this journey so far?
Absolutely. The one of the neat things about the journey so far is we've had significant help from leadership and support in that manner. But from a surprise, we've really seen a major transition within our service fleet. You talk about the numbers and the EV100 numbers that came out recently, and a lot of that progress and a lot of the progress we've seen in the US has been around last mile or sales fleets where you just put a vehicle choice on a selector for a sales driver, and oh, by the way, one of them is an EV. But for us, a big learning for the electrification piece has been that we were operationally already on a path and on a pace to change what we look like from a vehicle makeup and how we were to operate going forward. So for us, looking at the service fleet and electrifying the service fleet at a rapid pace has been a constant learning, and will continue to be a constant learning for us, knowing that as we began to make progress and as we learned from the field as a part of looking at operations, we found out quickly there were many role types and many jobs that we had out there that the electric powertrain absolutely met the needs of the drivers and met the needs of that specific role. So having that flexibility for us and the willingness to try and start somewhere, obviously years back, has lent itself to saying, okay, well, yeah, we started with some SUVs, the early SUVs that and sedans that came to market. But now we're in a space now where we have light duty trucks, and our small vans did shift into SUVs with ladders that meet numerous types of heights, and then to that point, making the next Silverado upfitting and approach to that job be different, not trying to put in this cookie cutter, rinse and repeat across the board has lent itself to the progress we continue to make. And as I tell my team every day, we will continue to have to pivot and change. But it's been an exciting journey so far.
That's great to hear. And you make a really good point about flexibility, right? That it's not just about the flexibility of vehicles, it's about also the users of this technology, right? Our drivers are a critical element of making this fleet transition a success. So electrifying a fleet isn't just a technology transition, it's behavior change. So maybe my next question is on that is what has been the feedback of drivers? You work with the drivers very closely a lot. What can you share about how they have adapted their routine? What did they have to change, and what lessons did we learn about helping people through this transition?
Right. And the change management will be constant.
Mhm.
For as much pushback that we received over the years regarding, the reasons it couldn't possibly work, we have just as many from their peers of saying, hey, here's all the things that have worked well. Here's the things that we can work on. But no, we're working with the drivers and the actual users of the assets constantly to make sure that we are flexible in saying, hey, that this didn't work, let's try this, and you help tell us what the need is or what the specifics are to making sure that you are successful in that manner. um to that point, the vehicles, moving from historical small vans and large vans that have been used in our industry for many years to what is a smart vehicle has and will be a dramatic change for anyone. In You're not only giving them a vehicle, but you're changing how someone has historically started their day.
Mhm.
You're many people are charging at home, and so for years past, all of us would get up, uh, and when we would leave, we'd go to a gas station, get coffee, get this, that, and everything to then go and start our day. The bulk of our drivers have home chargers. They leave the day with a full tank, if you will,
Mhm.
and then they're also, if needed, need to approach their day from a planning standpoint as to how many miles are they going to put on, where are they going to go. In many cases, that full battery in the morning is going to suffice for until they return at the end of the day, which has been fantastic for us because we have seen, the advertised ranges are happening. And then the other key piece of it is the fact that these drivers are learning how to utilize them because they're smart vehicles. They're to be driven differently. You do have the ability to have regenerative braking and have that electricity go back into the battery. And it is more critical than ever that the driver is using the asset in a manner that is most effective for them and obviously most effective for the vehicle. Because with that, change in tool of the job comes a whole learning curve of, oh wow, yeah, this one pedal driving is different, feels different, and suddenly you're looking for public charging if needed. And to that point, if suddenly you're going downhill for 3 or 4 miles, you're picking up electricity,
Mhm.
adding fuel to the vehicle, which is unheard of from any other vehicle that they had used prior.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people think about this kind of change in routine and how it affects um, the adoption rates. And I'm sure all of our drivers are very appreciative of you working so closely with them to understand this behavioral change and how anything needs to be adopted or adjusted. And I think that also impacts how fast they are willing to consider this change, right? This transition to electrification. So that's really good to hear. So you brought this up already, the charging topic, but maybe let's talk about that for a minute. As I read about this fleet electrification topic, especially for corporate fleets and even in private lives, one of the biggest concerns that folks have been bringing up is about the charging infrastructure. Right. So, as you said, we support home charging. We, of course, support public charging and charging at our company locations and many customer sites also. What have you learned, if anything, about building a charging ecosystem that actually works at scale and supports our drivers?
Yeah, you're exactly right, and we can never we can never talk enough about charging.
Yeah.
Honestly, as a part of electrification, that topic will come up, with whomever and at any time, whether you have whether you're fully charged or not. No, the neat thing about us having numerous years into this electrification transition is a lot of the assumptions that still exist today within the market. We've already worked our way through. So initial early days was, oh no, we are absolutely going to need one for one vehicle, charger to vehicle. Everyone's going to need one. It's the only way it's going to work. The only way we're going to be able to fulfill the range is to give them a home charger and make sure that that is how it works. That is not the case, and it truly is there is no one size fits all when it comes to charging. With them learning the vehicle, also a part of it is learning how they want to fuel it, from an electricity standpoint. As I mentioned, many cases we are charging at home, which is fantastic. It's still super easy, super convenient to have that asset be full of electricity when you go about your day. But the other piece of it is we do have facilities that do have charging, whether it is a customer that we already work with. A lot of our customers that we call on and service do have charging. Some of our offices have charging, and I know there's a greater intent to have more charging at offices. But everyone within Siemens doesn't have the exact same day, which makes it more critical that A, it works for them, but B, they have that ability to say, okay, today I'm going to go from here to here, and oh, I'm suddenly taking an emergency call, and I'm going to end my day elsewhere. The vehicles themselves and the technology allows the driver to do that and find where the infrastructure is, and then to that point have us, pay for the public charging and use the infrastructure that is out there. That's why even to this day we haven't limited the infrastructure that people can use, because if it's there and if it's convenient and it helps them get through their day, then that is the method we're continuously working on. From an infrastructure standpoint, do we continue to talk and work with public infrastructure providers and charger providers? Yes, and this industry will only continue to do so because there's change daily, there's change overnight. The amount of growth of public charging, I always say, if you're not looking for it, you won't find it. But once you find it and it's working for you, then it's definitely there. The growth in especially the southern portion of the United States has been significant. A lot of it is even tied to heavy duty trucking, which much of it isn't advertised. The growth of public charging, in general, is getting snippets here and there. But anybody looking at electrification and anybody operating EVs right now has seen the growth and has seen the ability to charge in significantly more places than we have in years past. So when you're already, as far along as we are with electrification. It's just lending itself to being that much better and that much easier to sustain, and not just sustain, but facilitate the use of battery electric vehicles in the US.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point, and many of folks might not know that we have vehicles in almost all 50 states, right, in this country, and the charging infrastructures growing everywhere is very important to us. And I think another thing that I hear you say over and over, and it's very important to emphasize, is this flexibility and adaptability in every aspect of this journey is, I think, critical to success, right? So flexibility
Absolutely.
and adaptability in charging, in understanding the behavior, adapting to the jobs that our drivers are doing. So yeah, that's a really good point.
And the
Uh,
neat thing too is the fact that we are using every type of charging. So,
mm,
we have a heavy duty electric Volvo tractor, semi that charges off of a 60-watt Heliox fast charger. To that point, we're charging Silverados and Equinoxes on, whether it be a DC fast charger public or it be a level 2 or even level 1 at home. We, as a fleet, are using every type of charging to facilitate what we need,
yeah,
and that in itself is great for not just conversations, but it's lending itself to best practices internally as much as it is external.
that's wonderful. Um, So maybe let's move on to the topic of cost, right? We have heard this repeatedly that transitions at this scale start working and being successful only when it starts making economic sense, right? And Siemens went from having just a handful of EVs in its fleet a few years ago to deploying thousands. So my question is, at what point did the business case really start to make sense? And what were some of the key factors that changed the ROI equation for us?
The biggest piece of support that we've had, especially as it pertains to accelerating in the manner that we has been the fact that we were already looking at our largest locations and saying, okay, how is this vehicle to be used? What should it look like? What should the payload be? And put it around what the tool of the job was versus worrying about it being an electric powertrain. When the focus went to, hey, let's figure out what do we want to look like in the future, and what do we want to look like when we grow up, if you will.
Mhm.
That's the approach we were already taking, and we already had significant leadership support in doing that and figuring out location by location, role by role, what is the next best step for us. We knew it would have to change, but we didn't know how much we would have the ability to change it within the electric vehicle space. So that has been extremely unique. But once we started identifying not only vehicles that were going to work, but that consistent leadership support of, hey, okay, let's do that one, let's try this, let's not go with a one size fits all, let's figure out how it is, what success looks like now, what success could look like in 6 months, and what it would look like down the road. And so the business case to that point is about the needs of the role, with utilizing a different tool. But with that comes the progress we've made, and the amount of people utilizing them and learning from them and helping us learning, and proving that, oh yeah, it is just this having a different powertrain hasn't significantly changed how we're doing the role, or the ranges and things like that people were essentially really worried about, and uh, early days scared to even attempt. the ranges are meeting the needs, the assets are meeting the needs. Is there still a gap in the medium duty space? Yes, but we're working with working on solutions with not only Siemens but others as well to come up with those. And then as you're talking about the ROI and business case, we essentially are putting tires and wipers on these because of the lack of moving parts. And that has been a really unique, significant shift for us to say, okay, well, we're looking at maintenance as a company completely different than what we did before. But there's 5 key points that the industry is currently in that we weren't in before. So we're now in a place, and mind you, we're years on our journey already, but we're now in a place where the cost of these EVs is coming down. We're not stuck to a retail price. We're not stuck to 5 different choices. The amount of vehicle types, the second thing is the amount of vehicle types have increased, and we do have more options. Same token, we have an increase in range that we didn't have before. So with the new vehicle types comes increased amount of ranges, which that only helps. The charging speeds of these new EVs is significantly higher than it was before. So level 2 that you've had for numerous years, suddenly you get a newer vehicle and it charges that much faster, has that ability to take the charge. And then finally, I talked about it earlier, the fact that public charging infrastructure has increased, that's significantly helped with us ramping up. So those 5 items right there are only helping us in a transition that was, like I said, that we were already in a spot where we were up against things that had higher costs and things that were unknown. But now we're in a space where yeah, when they're actually facilitating the ranges and doing the jobs, and we're having this ability to charge faster, and all these new factors come in to only make it easier. That is what is going to help us continue to ramp up and get the rest of the work done, if you will.
Yeah, really, I mean, all of them excellent points, but I think 2 that just bear repeating is just about evaluating what your current fleet is before you start blindly electrifying everything, right? As is, right? That's a really important point. I think just we need to emphasize that we what you did was evaluating, is the fleet doing the job it's supposed to be doing before we start replacing them 1:1 with EVs. I think that's a really important first step that any fleet operator should start looking at first.
Right. Often people are waiting for the light switch moment, I like to call it.
Right, right.
So yeah, to that point, I'm going to buy 100 EVs today, and tomorrow I'm going to be electric.
Yeah.
But it's the 100 of the same vehicle, and I'm just going to hope that it's going to work for the person actually using it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a good point. You talked a little bit about working with partners and OEMs, right? So maybe let's talk about that for a moment, about the vehicles themselves. I know you are working very closely with vehicle OEMs, right? I am curious on how that relationship is, what you have learned from these partnerships, and if there are any other partnerships that you think are critical for making this transition successful. You spoke about, charging infrastructure as well, but anything that you would like to highlight in terms of partnerships?
Absolutely. Yeah, everyone is a part of this entire ecosystem, and the neat thing for me being in supply chain is that ability to not only facilitate the creation of the ecosystem, but to maintain it and plug and play what works and what doesn't work. So work a lot with the OEMs. Even prior to the Equinox being even produced, we were already partnering with General Motors on switching to the Equinox SUV and making that upfitting and custom upfitting, turning moving a small van to an SUV was an undertaking in itself and something the industry hadn't seen. So that was not only first of its kind for the Equinox, but dramatically shifted in how people looked at an SUV and looked at the utility of an SUV. So we created that initial setup within the ICE version, knowing that we needed it to go in the BEV version when it actually came to fruition. So worked closely month by month, hand in hand with General Motors, saying, hey, yeah, it's working in the Equinox, but when that new EV version comes out, how different is it going to be? Is it going to be close? And to that point, the spec was extremely close, and from an upfitting or an adjustment for us, it was minimal, and that was critical for us taking a significant first step and a first jump, because it meant we could make the progress and ramp up in the manner that we wanted to, and that leadership desired as well. The other piece is the Silverado, and from early days of the Silverado, there weren't many choices for upfitting, because the truck really hadn't been to market for very long. There weren't bed caps, there weren't racks, there weren't all the things that we need and use for ladders and all the things important to us. They weren't in the market. So we had to partner with specific upfitters that were in the market to create things on our own for our Siemens drivers within the Silverado and within the vehicles we have. So that partnership with the upfitters and creating stuff from scratch, not only critical to us, but also it helped GM have other choices and helped our peers have other choices of what they could put on a Silverado. And to that point, with it, the fleet industry being the way it is, that will continue. We will continue to not only push the OEMs, but the upfitters as well, to say, hey, what about this? We have a role that needs this. Let's attempt to build something that meets the need. Where, back to the OEM conversation, there is still a gap in that medium duty EV space that has payload and has a significant amount of range. We constantly talk to the OEMs, and in some cases have even talked through the potential for creating vehicles from scratch, just to meet needs. The largest EV customers across the board talking and working with each other to say, hey, here's what that medium duty vehicle should look like. Here's how many I'm gonna need, and let's create and improve the market for this vehicle or this specific build. So those conversations have to continue to happen. The evolution of trucks and vehicles that meet each of the unique spaces and ranges and payloads has to continue, but it takes progress by companies like Siemens and progress from others to say, hey, you know what, this is working. Let's talk through meeting that need and getting to that next spot within not just the US, but within the industry.
That's really great to hear. Yeah, sometimes it's painful if you are the first on the journey, right? But that also has its benefits. That this kind of partnership and conversations might not happen if we are not first at the table. And I'm sure others, even though EMs, will be benefiting from this early partnerships. So, Adam, it was a pleasure speaking to you today about Siemens's journey on fleet electrification. I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing your insights on adapting to new challenges and making the business case for electrification. It's clear that our journey is a powerful example of how strategic vision and commitment can make fleet electrification achievable at scale, and you're showing that. And again, a huge congratulations to you and your team on reaching this 50% electrification milestone for the US fleet. And we are certainly looking forward to hearing about the next steps and how you are getting to the remaining 50%. So thank you.
Thank you.
And a big thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this episode of Siemens's Decoding Decarbonization podcast. We are grateful to have you as part of our sustainability community. To stay connected and to ensure you never miss an episode, please subscribe to Decoding Decarbonization on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to continue to bring you many more insightful discussions that will help you advance your sustainability journey. Thank you.